Okay. I just like, well, last year I was kind of like me experimenting with the format of it was sort of what I said before the critique started. So I kind of was coming to the conclusion based on sort of some things that Steven said, but also some things that some other people in my life have said, where it's sort of like, you know, it's less important what I say about the art and more important what you say about the art. And in fact, in other words, I guess it's not what I think it means. I would prefer it if you told me what you think it means, because that would be more useful to me, and maybe even to you, but I can't speak for the.
But this is the moment where we get the opportunity to direct the discussion in channels that we think are desirable.
Well, maybe it would be interesting if somebody could, maybe someone could like direct it.
Maybe you could just tell us a little, like, some things you were thinking about. Like, you don't need to direct us, but you can just give us a little.
Well, this is sort of, I can sort of tell you something.
Bear in mind that Phoebe hasn't heard you talk before, so you don't be afraid of repeating yourself.
These paintings are sort of in line with what I was doing last year, but sort of not, you know. So it's sort of a, I mean, and they're kind of different, but they're also kind of similar. But for instance, I mean, I'm thinking about AI generated imagery. I'm thinking about religious art.
What are you thinking about the AI generated?
Well, I'm looking at sort of, I kind of looked at AI generated imagery and I'm like, how does the computer generate these images? How do I think that the computer generates the images? And I was kind of coming to I was like thinking about H.R. Giger and how, and also another artist that I was interested in who uses this decalcomania technique. And I was kind of thinking about that with how that kind of relates to stable diffusion. But I'm just, it's all sort of, I don't know. But that's just one of the. But it's very it is sort of like, it was sort of like a formless thing. I was also thinking about how stable diffusion, H.R. Giger's kind of like this color zone concept, and also, you know, this sort of maybe separation of planes could be sort of like you can color zone the planes. I don't know. It's different. So
Okay.
that's
Can I ask
just.
you a quick question? Because I just don't know. What's stable diffusion?
Well, I was just watching a video about it, and it's sort of like, so well, I was just watching a video about it, so I'm gonna just talk about this video that I watched. So I don't know if this is true or not, but the computer is programmed to, instead of something, I was like looking at the Facebook Meta AI thing, but I'm not sure if that uses the same method as what I'm about to say right now, because I think they might use like a 3D modeling generation software thing, but I don't know for sure. But the stable diffusion way was like I don't know if you remember the DALL-E Mini with the AI generated imagery, but it's sort of like, I think from this video it said like you get like a picture and then you add noise to it, and then you tell the thing to correct the
You
noise.
say like, what do you predict like each
Yeah.
like blacked out pixel would be?
And then you rate it for like correctness.
Okay, so
And
I don't want to get too far off of what you. I had no idea what that meant, so I just wanted to.
Check.
So you're thinking about AI image generation, like as a painter. How's that?
yeah, well, I think, you know, maybe like it could be like you kind of work on the sort of broader aspects of it, and then sort of refine it. But also, I'm also thinking about, but this isn't true for all these paintings or most of my paintings in general. But I'm also thinking about, can we incorporate the AI into the practice by typing in a bunch of crazy stuff and then printing out a bunch of images and then maybe looking at this, looking at that, seeing maybe like a pattern. And I was like reading about Chinese art and how they kind of use these like brush strokes where like leaves are all the same shape, so maybe the AI could have like a shape, like you can get your shape from that and then use that in the image.
Okay.
It's a good start.
Yeah. Good.
You
Okay,
read this
good.
one too?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that. I was outside and I was like, I was kind of thinking about all this and I was like, I don't know if that, I don't even know if that like that. I mean, all that's just in the background. Really, it's just the landscape, I guess.
Let's open it up to you guys.
Thanks for answering my question.
Well, I think what you said about image generating, like I feel like that's a useful step for you because you're always kind of constructing these, like the large one in the middle. You're clearly drawn to this kind of like hierarchical division of space and planes, and there's a real authority that comes with that when you're referencing like religious or mythical imagery. So they're like powerful forces that I guess I don't know where you're going to go with it, but I can understand that perspective.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm really drawn to this idea of like you said, hierarchical, like ordering and structuring the universe, because like I think that's something that AI and like maybe religious iconography have in common, that people who are making religious art were trying to like understand how their world worked and how their power structures worked. And then AI is a system that is trying to organize a huge amount of information and spit out what it sees as reality from that and organize it. So I think there's an interesting connection there. And how complex your composition is with the three realms in this middle painting, I think starts to get at it.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar too.
Can't hear you.
I was gonna say something similar too, because like thinking about religion as organizing people in the same way that AI organizes an oftentimes biased set of information is really interesting, and kind of connecting it to traditional religious iconography and maybe even ways of painting. And I think there's a connection definitely to be made through that. It's just, am I allowed to ask a question? Like a clarification question? Okay. Well, I mean.
Do you really have to? Why don't you just say what you think?
Yeah, no, then I think you should just say what you think. Well, using AI to come up with these images is, I think, a really interesting concept, especially because it's almost like you're creating a religious.
Also what?
You're creating almost a religious set that competes with the AI, or even like a AI generated world that can organize people. I don't know. I'm rambling at this point. Sorry.
These images we didn't come up with them with AI.
That was my question.
No, I didn't. I mean, I didn't come up with them with the AI. I only used the AI to sort of get, like, you know how, I mean, in Chinese painting, they have sort of like a thing where they'll have like a shape of a leaf or something like that, or a shape of a little clump of grass or something, and you can kind of, maybe you can use that to make like a cloud or figure out what the grass is supposed to be like or something like that. That would be interesting. And the reason why I feel like that's kind of connected to the ideal world of sort of maybe this heavenly sort of world, is because the computer is sort of it's like a living artifact of like logic and idealist sort of thinking. It's like a construction based all around it. Every single part of it is based around that. Sort of taking the ideal and bringing it into reality in the most sort of like wild sort of like form that we can't.
I've been reading this book. I can't remember the exact title of it, but it's about AI. It's like called like God, Animal, Machine, or something like that. I'll look it up. And somewhere in it, she says that the thing about science is that it doesn't sort of deal in the things that it can't prove, and so it gets its authority by sort of only focusing on the things that it can prove. And so there's this kind of lie of its like truth. Like its truth is like tautological, like it proves what it already knows in a sense. And I feel like religion sort of worked that way too. Like they're both belief structures and they're both like sort of working in the things that they can. I mean, I suppose they're different, but I mean, this thinking about what is the line from Karl Marx, the opium of the masses.
Religion is the opium of the
Religion,
masses.
right. But I do feel like these things are really about power. Like somebody mentioned power structures. They do feel like about myth and how now AI, like the sort of, I think there's a lot of like mythology around technology and the sort of power of technology. And so there's a kind of interesting it's kind of it is the sense of touch and color and texture and slowness of these seems to sort of be a meditation on those things without using them. Because sometimes when AI is used in pictures, I find it to be kind of like cold, like it leaves me cold. But these just have all this kind of warmth in them. And then the self-portrait really adds that kind of like really trying to look at these belief structures and kind of one trying to find themselves within them. They're kind of psychologically charged and in those powers without sort of like letting those powers be overly dominant.
Well, there's another, I want to go down that same road a little bit too, but I have a kind of different feeling about it. The belief structures, that's not quite the word I want, but I'll use it for the moment, like religions that are generated out of human culture, have a certain kind of internal coherence, emotional internal coherence. The aspect of AI that, or scientific belief structures like we were talking about, also, I mean, the scientific version has a kind of internal coherence too that may be tautological. But nobody really yet knows how AI thinks. I was reading something really interesting the other day about there's an AI chess master that can defeat so far anybody, any human player. But the designers of the system don't know how it's doing it. They understand how they program it, but they don't understand the results of it. So there's a kind of just emotional distinction for me between the way that AI works its systems and the way that these older human belief structures do, potentially anyway. And there's something about the mashup of cultural patterns of these paintings that it doesn't make sense. I mean, it doesn't make any kind of, typical, conventional sense in terms of those belief structures. And so what I get out of it is a certain flavor of chaos that perhaps is related to the, affectless logic of the machine or something like that. In addition to what Fox was talking about, what the other people were talking about, that ends up becoming the subject to me as a kind of arbitrary cultural mashup that's kind of terrifying. So that's all.
I first walked in here, I definitely, I think these paintings are weird and I like them. And my first impression was like, oh, we have someone who's like really into painting, like a painter. And I'm like excited about that. I never would have thought about AI. I just wanted to put that out there.
And that's why I'm kind of wanting to something.
Yeah, I never would have thought about AI, but I think if you want that to be part of what people are thinking about when they see your work, I don't know. I feel like, I mean, an AI is only as good as the data it's trained on. It's like all about pattern recognition and prediction, and I'm not someone who is particularly like taken in by like the I don't know, like some kind of promise or romantic idea about it. Really, I think it's like a generalization tool in a way. Like if you want to know if you if you have like a cat in a picture, you can train an AI to identify cats or like early cancer. And I think like something like that, I'm interested like that type of application. But in terms of images or like some kind of like surrealism generator, I think you're a much more interesting surrealism generator than an AI would be. And I don't know, I like want to get a closer look at the trees after what you said about like the shape of a leaf or something. So I feel like, I don't know, some of these things in here feel really like you're pulling really specific like styles that are different from like on either side of the composition here. Or like from different landscapes or something. Like you have the like, river of blood, which isn't that different from your stream bed over here, it's just a different color with ferns. And I don't know, it seems like an apocalyptic kind of like fantastic thing. Like I wonder, like, is there a game associated with this? It seems like related to video games, maybe as much as AI or anything else. But yeah, I don't know. I just think I don't super see AI in this. But that's partly because I can tell you're like interested in the kind of specificity you get as a painter, like the one all the way on the left. You're like really paying attention to what you're looking at. And that's like the exact opposite of AI, which is like all about an ideal of something or a generalization of something. And it's not at all, it's like it eats specificity and spits out an ideal. And painting is the opposite of that. So it's kind of, I see that you're a painter, talking about AI, but in this way that you still are.
I totally agree. I was also reading in a similar way, but thinking like why AI? Because, and also I remember my first crit I had this program, I brought up AI. Fox told me that I should read a book about AI before talking about AI. And I feel like if you're gonna use AI, I know you read books about religion, you read these sacred religious texts, but I don't really think you ever read a book about AI. So it's interesting to me why that is brought up, because you have this immense knowledge of what these things mean symbolically. You're not just putting these random like AI might do without clear consciousness. You know what those patterns are, like why the Chinese painters do that pattern. You're a researcher, and you're presenting your research. To me, that's what it seems like, because it's the middle painting. It's like a common trope that you show us in the past with hellscapes. Like everything's chaotic. There's monsters. There's this blood of sea water coming in, and there's thunder. There's like these crazy tasks and everything. So I'm just really curious, like, why we don't really talk about that part. Like, what is making you so resisting yourself to like tell people like this is hell. Like, that's my reading of the paintings you do is like this is hell. Like this is the globalization hell. Like this is where people would go if you don't really behave well, kind of.
I will say in his defense, he didn't really like come out and say these paintings are about AI.
Exactly.
I really didn't hear him say that. So I think we might be putting too much emphasis on that. Like, I think you know, I kind of think of these as self-portraits, and that's what interests me about them. And I do think that there's maybe an aesthetic to AI that I don't think is not there. It's a kind of video game, a fantasy, a kind of a person who's like very kind of Rembrandt in the shadows over there, you know, looking at himself in the mirror, kind of solitary. Even the picture of the unicorn is very masculine. It's a very masculine uniform, like unicorn, like something the unicorns are maybe more feminine. I think of them as more feminine, and then you have this really buff unicorn. There's just like a layer of, I think, personal fantasy involved in these that is, I think that personal fantasy and the internet are totally inseparable in our culture right now. And I see these really as a person dealing with the kind of layers of desire, interest, you know, kind of truth, finding oneself sort of inside of various systems, various sort of sets of knowledge. It's a kind of searching feeling that I get from these.
Yeah, I think that's right. I feel that way too. I want to make one general point, and because I also think he never said that AI is the subject of these paintings. He said he was using it as a tool, as part of the generative process. But also, a general point, while if you're interested in a subject, finding more information about it is, you know, usually a good idea. There's also something like creative misperception. Like you may read about something and come up with some weird idiosyncratic idea about what it means that has absolutely nothing to do with the subject itself, but that might generate really interesting art. So, I mean, that is another example of how art is not really about accurate information. It's more about imaginative, you know,
Misinterpretation.
flowers.
Misinterpretation.
Misinterpretation, yeah. So even if his idea of AI is, you know, whether or not it's accurate to you know, the science of AI is probably irrelevant to these paintings, although it might be interesting to talk about on another occasion. All right, let's get some more voices going here.
The painting on the far right, I see a landscape with a small river waterfall that could be the focal point, or maybe like the path leading up to the waterfall is the focal point, and that to me gives like more of like a narrative of some kind. I feel I'm interested in like that path going to the waterfall. And
Wait, it's also very reminiscent of the Courbet source of the various springs that Paul Galvez is talking about. I don't know if that came through unconsciously or whether you intended that, but anyway, it's pretty unmistakable with what you're talking about with the spring here gushing back.
And to follow up on what Fox was saying about the unicorn, I agree that the muscular anatomy makes it seem like the unicorn is masculine, and yet it's gazing up at a glittery sky. So I'm like, are we talking about like sexuality or, you know, transgender identity, something of that nature? And in the second painting, I don't see religion. I see like the painter's personal world that I could only understand if I knew more about you, or if I saw like 10 other pieces that were a continuation of this. I see 3 climates united by trees and monsters and this bloody river. And for me, it all of this chaotic and yet needing to be together gives me more of like mythology and magic and almost like kind of like what Isaac was saying, but not necessarily hell, more like undiscovered places that exist on Earth right now.
I would just say it's not so much for me. There's clear, I think, visual references to medieval painting, and medieval painting is, you know, they're narratives of religion, and I think whether there's an actual like religious story in it or not, I don't think that you can sort of take away the like if you look at a medieval painting, and I think that these are based in that kind of painting. So that's sort of what I mean by religion is not religion in the kind of like content sense, but in the sense of the aesthetic of it. And I would just say that one thing I'm really enjoying about the self-portrait is the scale shift. You tend to have a very, very compressed way of making paintings, and the one on the left, the brush marks are slightly larger, and because there's less subject matter packed into the space of the frame, there's just a lot more air and room in that painting. And I feel like that's a really beautiful painting, and I think that level of air and spaciousness is really exciting.
I want to go back to something we were talking about before in this one. I said something about it in the collage space, and I just wanted to make clear that what I meant by that. So the painting's basically divided into 3 vertical zones, and then subdivided so you get 6 zones, right, upper and lower. And so even though the space is, has a vanishing point-ish space with, it's an illusionistic space, when you mash them together like that, they don't add up to one coherent space. So it's a discrepancy between the spaces that I was talking about, and that I think is really interesting in this. And Joe, in the past, where when you would do that sometimes in a much flatter way that was more like Persian paintings, rather than in this kind of surrealistic Dali-esque way, I think that both of those things are really useful points of departure, different kinds of spaces in the paintings as a way of creating this sense of discrepancy or disorientation or something like that. The other thing I want to say is about the My Little Pony painting. I hadn't thought of this before.
My Little Pony to you. I said that's Mr. My Little Pony.
Mr. My Little Pony.
Unicorn.
Yeah.
Mr. My Little Unicorn.
This thing of bulking up the protagonist in these paintings that you've always done. Suddenly it hit me, and especially in this case, that it reminds me, and this is not meant as a criticism, it's at all. It reminds me of Nazi paintings, of like Arnold Brecker, who was Hitler's favorite artist. They have this kind of hyper-masculinized figures with, bulked up muscles. They look like they just got through a Charles Atlas course. And so there's a kind of nightmarish thing about, what Fox was talking about, the kind of gender assumptions about unicorns, or, that when you have this suddenly hyper-masculinized unicorn, it's very disturbing. And so anyway, even though I don't think that's your cultural reference, Joe, I think that plane of reference exists in the culture in general. Is that the end?
Yes.
Okay.